This man never needs any introduction. The greatest of all time, a cultural icon, and one of the best fighters in any combat discipline to ever live and fight. This is Muhammad Ali. He's essentially made the 1960s and 1970s his own playground, with some of the highest profile matches ever in boxing history. You could find yourself or others still quoting "sting like a butterfly" over and over again because his defenses and movement skills were just that good. Combined with the power output he frequently showed, it made up for a style that would go on to become extremely influential. But the sands of time have moved on. With his career ending in the 1980s, the sport has evolved, and while there's no questioning his status as the GOAT, a question still remains. Just how good was he? We'll dissect it today. Early career. As an amateur while he was still going by his birth name, Cassius Clay, he had distinguished himself as possibly the most exciting and most skillful amateur boxer anyone had seen in action until that point. He effortlessly chewed through the opposition in the 1960 Rome Olympics to take home the gold medal. The transition to a professional career would be taken extremely seriously by Ali, and he took his training up a notch to a new standard. He went above and beyond what many professional boxing debutantes would do. One of those things that he did was spending hours jumping rope to toughen his legs and working almost exclusively on heavy punching bags to strengthen his hooks and jabs, both of which would become famous for their ferocity later on. His God-given reflexes would also have their genesis during this time as he practiced in front of a mirror to enhance them. He made his professional debut on October 29, 1960, where he secured a 6-round decision victory over Tony Hunsaker. He then went on to amass an impressive record of 19 wins, with 15 of them by knockout, until the end of 1963. Muhammad Ali from 1960 and through 1963 was arguably at his fastest, but also at his most guarded. Being in his early 20s, he had yet to develop the trademark toughness for which he became world famous later on. So when he was matched against Sonny Liston, a man who genuinely terrified others by way of his brutal continence, imposing physique, and great strength, there were many who wrote him off forever. Prime. He came into his prime the moment he defeated and overcame the crazy and monstrous Sonny Liston for the WBA and WBC World Heavyweight titles in 6 rounds. The world went crazier in the aftermath of the impressive rematch, where he managed to knock out Sonny Liston completely cold in the very first round. This was the first match that saw the infamous Phantom Punch, a knockout punch supposedly so quick and strong that it smacked Liston in the face without anyone noticing outright. His legend became impossible to argue right against then and there, and he spent the rest of the 1960s cutting through the competition like a madman. It was also during this time that his loud and brash trash-talking persona only grew further and attracted the media attention that he deserved. Along with his political activism that he kept consistent, he became a larger-than-life figure in boxing. This reputation can be argued to have played a role in increasing his stature over his opponents in the ring. Indeed, only George Chuvalo in 1966 and Ernie Terrell in 1967 were proved to be worthy opponents who could take the great Muhammad Ali through all 15 rounds of a match and not be knocked out. His endurance and toughness had grown to insane levels. Ali successfully defended his title 7 more times through March 22, 1967. But his TKO of Zoa Fawley was his last fight in the ring for more than 3 years, as his legal struggle and fight for the right to not be conscripted into the U.S. intervention in Vietnam consumed him. Despite such a long hiatus from boxing, he came back in 1970 to completely mess up Jerry Quarry and Oscar Bonavena. It was only a shock loss to Joe Frazier in 1971 that gave him pause. But Frazier would fall under the weight of his endurance later in 1974. Indeed, despite the few losses that he suffered in the 1970s, he would end up owning the decade, just like he had owned the previous decade to ensure a 20-year reign as the greatest living boxer. He had morphed into a cultural icon, prompting Mobutu Sese Seko, the ruler of Zaire, now the Democratic Republic of the Congo, to host the legendary Rumble in the Jungle in 1975. For this match, Ali brought out his entire arsenal and pushed out every last ounce of energy and focus within him to overcome the powerful beast of a man that George Foreman was. Foreman was one of the strongest punchers in the history of boxing. His right hook was simply terrifying to behold, even when launched against a boxing bag. During their fight, Ali adopted the rope-a-dope tactic, where he bounced off the ropes to whiz in and out of Freeman's punching range. He allowed Freeman to take shots at him just to tire Foreman out. Ali took punch after punch, only then to knock him down and out of the match in the 8th round. This fight, which is widely regarded as the 20th century's biggest sport event, fixed Ali's position as the toughest and greatest boxer of all time. As all good things must come to an end, so did he by the end of the 1970s, losing his belts to Leon Spinks in 1978, and then losing the chance to get it back at the hands of Larry Holmes. But the legacy he's left behind is unmatched to this very day. Therefore, let's now take a look at the recipe behind such stardom in greater detail. Strengths. The litany of strengths and skills that crafted Muhammad Ali into an unquestionable legend starts with the lightning-fast footwork and hand speed that served as the basis of his early career rise. Both of these metrics were unparalleled, and there were few, if any, who could match him in both. His ability to swiftly move in and out of range allowed him to evade opponents' punches and set up his own combinations and counter combinations. Eating a good counter from Ali was a dangerous predicament, and if it happened successfully, a knockout was not far off in the distance. This also frequently came in the form of Ali's shuffle, a quick successive movement of the legs made possible by excellent footwork that masked the attacks that were to follow. It also momentarily confused the opponent as to what exactly was going on. As you can guess by the name, it was Muhammad Ali that introduced this to the boxing world, and its debut in 1966 shocked boxing fans. Indeed, his agility was a critical asset that always benefited him. With his bottomless reserves of stamina gained from using the skipping rope like a madman, he danced around opponents, circled the ring, and controlled the pace of the fight expertly. His strategic use of space and angles allowed him to dictate the flow of the match. This complemented his unique movement-heavy style of defense that he relied on due to his leaner physique compared to other heavyweight fighters. It relied on slipping punches with head movement, shoulder rolls, and ducking. When it came to attacking, he made expert use of the famous jab. The Ali jab was a weapon in itself, and he was in fact one of the first to sport a jab that hurt and damaged almost as much as uppercuts, hooks, and overhangs. His long snapping jab disrupted opponents' rhythm, kept them at bay, and set up his powerful right hand quite expertly. The right hand in particular was often thrown while he and his opponent were in motion, often out the blue. Such a disorienting strike proved to be one of the major contributors to his knockout victories. From the late 1960s onwards, Muhammad Ali displayed exceptional and exemplary fight IQ. Ali adjusted his tactics based on opponents. Against George Foreman, for example, he employed the rope-a-dope strategy, absorbing punishment to tire out his rival, knowing that he wouldn't have lasted at all if he went toe-to-toe with him as he usually did. And as mentioned earlier, a significant part of the reason why he's the greatest comes down to his off-stage persona. Ali held unwavering self-belief and confidence in the faces of what was to him not only a hard career to make a living out of, but also a political statement to make against a country that judged him by the color of his skin. This is exactly why he's since become an inspiration for countless boxers. His resilience was nothing to scoff at, and losing the mantle of undefeated at the hands of Joe Frazier failed to dampen his spirits one bit. Sure enough, he would end up collecting his dues from Joe Frazier. He was more than a fighter. He was a cultural phenomenon. Weaknesses. While we're still impressed to this day when we look at how Muhammad Ali was able to beautifully and smoothly evade punches to the head, it must be said that his defenses often left many gaps to be exploited. We can't ignore the effect that fighting in this way had on his health, as he developed Parkinson's later in life. His tendency to keep his hands low and rely on head movement made him susceptible to well-timed punches. This way, he was especially vulnerable to boxers who boasted good punching speed and accuracy to rival him, such as Joe Frazier. It was difficult against such opponents to continue his tried-and-tested strategy of dancing in and out of opponents' reach to tire them out. After all, Ali wasn't going to continue to remain the fastest and most agile fighter compared to the rest for long. Although Ali had a remarkable chin, he was not invulnerable. He suffered knockdowns in several fights, notably against Henry Cooper, Joe Frazier, and Sonny Banks. His overzealous willingness to engage in toe-to-toe exchanges, to attempt to dominate his opponents mentally, sometimes worked against him. No plan survives contact with the enemy after all. And today it's widely agreed that Ali took way too many punches to the head in his career. It also might have been better for Ali to retire from the sport around 1977. As time went on, Ali began to lose his most important assets, cardiovascular ability and agility. Dancing around his opponents and using the ropes soon became too expensive. However, it also drained his physical energy. In later years, this approach contributed to his fatigue and reduced effectiveness in the later rounds, leading him to take devastating knockout losses. Opponents like Larry Holmes fully pounced on this decline, exploiting openings that wouldn't have been available during Ali's prime. All combined, however, we can safely say that the fanfare surrounding the absolute phenomenon that Muhammad Ali was as a boxer is more than justified. He really was a skilled boxer who set new standards when it came to speed and agility as a heavyweight. He ought to be credited for the introduction of the Ali Shuffle alone. Its utility as a tool for concealing brutal hits cannot be understated ever. And finally, a boxer is as great as the opponents he defeats. Indeed, Ali has effortlessly and creatively defeated some of the most dangerous heavy hitters of his time. This is just one of the factors that ensure his continued legacy as the greatest of all time. But what do you think? Do you agree with this assessment? Are there things we've missed? Comment down below. Don't forget to leave us a like and subscribe. We'll see you again when the dust settles on the canvas.